the only real threat to the United States right now, the only real realistic threat is a large-scale cyber attack that denies us the critical infrastructure that makes our lives happy, healthy, and whole. And what we've seen in analysis of our systems, our SCADA, which are the networks that move everything from power to water to gas to all the things we need.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we explore how people, process, policy, and technology drive effective change. This is Dr. Darren, Chief Enterprise Architect, Educator, Author, and most importantly, your host.
On this episode, Nationstate Cybersecurity is Digital Transformation with Eric ONeill, former FBI counterintelligence.
Eric, welcome to the show. Darren, it's good to be here.
Hey, I was very excited about when we started talking. I said, don't tell me anymore, Eric, because I want to save that. I need to hit the record button. So I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started on cybersecurity and threat nations and all this stuff, everyone knows on my show that I only have superheroes on the show, and every superhero has a background story. So Eric, what's your background story?
Well, I don't know if I'm a superhero, but I do have a background story and a pretty unique one. My earliest job that really matters was working undercover for the FBI. I was a counterintelligence and counterterrorism undercover operative, which meant I chased spies and terrorists all over, mostly around Washington, D.C., and stopped them before they did whatever dastardly act they were planning. If we
All right, that's super cool all by itself.
Right.
Eric.
The superhero analogy. So most of that was working undercover on the street, using a lot of classified technology, good old human intelligence gathering, surveillance ops, whether it's vehicle versus on foot, and tracking those targets to stop them before, like I said, they do whatever their plan was, either steal information or blow something up. And then at the very end of my career, by my choice, I was asked to join and go undercover in the most unique case the FBI had ever run, to go undercover in FBI headquarters, which was unprecedented, as myself, which was really weird, to catch a man who turned out to be the most damaging spy in U.S. history, Robert Hanssen. And Hanssen had spied for the Soviet Union and then Russia. That's how long he spied. He survived the collapse for 22 years of his 25-year career. He was known only under the code name Graysuit, this mythological, legendary figure that the entire intelligence community had been hunting for decades. And at the very end of his career, before he was about to retire, months before he was about to retire, a former KGB source sold a small file of information to a very fortunate joint task force between the FBI and CIA, who opened it thinking it was going to be someone else, and then were shocked that it was Robert Hanssen. The reason? Hanssen was the top FBI analyst for the Soviet Union and then Russia. And at one point during his career, he was asked to catch Graysuit. So he was asked to catch himself, which was insane, right? And so Robert Hanssen, the FBI had to put together this very unique case in days. They gave him his dream job. They promoted him to executive service. They brought him back to FBI headquarters. They put him in charge of a section called the Information Assurance Section, which was ostensibly building cybersecurity for the FBI. And they had needed somebody to go undercover with him. And that ended up being me, because I knew how to catch a spy and turn on a computer. Because we were doing cybersecurity for the FBI, they needed someone who could sell the position. And that ended up being me. I did manage to catch him. Yeah, I did manage to catch him in the end. I found a smoking gun in the case that made the legal case a slam dunk. And since then, I have been a national security attorney. I run a couple of companies, one that does cybersecurity, one that does competitive intelligence. And near and dear to my heart, my two favorite things in the world is I'm a global public speaker, keynote speaker on cybersecurity and catching spies and espionage, and an author. I've written 2 books. My first, Gray Day, is the story of how we caught Robert Hanssen. And my newest book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, is everything you need to know to protect yourself in a world, an often dizzying world, of cyber attacks.
Yeah, we got to talk about the cyber attacks. I just had on my show a personal security expert. both physical security and cybersecurity, which was very
Yes.
fascinating. And it's kind of starts with that personal cybersecurity, but we just touched a little tiny bit. I want to go a little bit deeper with you, Eric. But before we do that, I've got to ask a couple interesting questions about going undercover as yourself. That's very unique. Yeah, that's an incredible story all by itself. What How long ago was this that this happened? I mean, because he was in operation for 22 years. How long ago did we catch him, and were you
Right.
involved in that? I would call it a physical honeypot, because basically that's what you guys did. You created a
Hey,
honeypot.
that's a good way to describe it. And essentially, the FBI did a lot of hard work to get very lucky at the very end of his career. So in the FBI, you have mandatory retirement at 25 years as a special agent. We only learned about Robert Hansen, learned that he was the biggest possible for gray suit in December of 2000. And he was going to retire in April of 2001, his mandatory retirement. So the FBI had to do something that would keep him in place and sell a job that the FBI desperately needed, that was going to allow us to extend his service and not force his retirement. So they give him his dream job, they extend his service in the FBI, and they pay him more. So coming into that room 9930 in FBI headquarters on the 9th floor, he had to be insanely suspicious that the FBI had learned he was the spy and was closing the lid on a coffin just at the end of his career. For Hansen, his problem was there were only two of us in that room, me and him. So in order to determine whether this was an investigation or the FBI had just given him his dream job because he was the only one who could do it, which is what he wanted to believe, he could only attack me. And that was the big difficulty for that investigation. I had to succeed at the overt job of building cybersecurity for the FBI. We had to prove we were doing something, but also succeed at the covert job of, number one, not screwing up, making sure that Hansen believed that this was a real job. Number two, finding the investigation that proved to us that he was the spy we've been after 22 years. And then number three, find the smoking gun that would lead to his arrest and a slam dunk conviction. You very rarely have a case where you succeed in all three of those. And
It's amazing.
And just by, I'm not exactly sure still how I managed it, but we as a team and I as the undercover asset managed to catch Hansen.
All right, we could talk about that all day, but I want to get into, the nation threats that we're seeing here. The level and sophistication of the attacks that we're seeing are pretty astronomical. Everything from AI deep fakes and social engineering attacks to just brute force cyber attacks. It's all over the board right now. So
it is.
What do
the United States has never been more under siege in cyber warfare than today. And I talk a little bit about this in my first book, and I carry it forward and really explain it in my second. The Cold War never ended for Russia, and China has jumped on the bandwagon. Iran knows that the only way they can attack us here in the homeland is through cyber. And North Korea is basically just a bunch of robber barons who steal from countries in the West in order to improve their economy. Also, they don't feel very fondly toward the United States. But cyber attacks, cyber terrorism, cyber warfare allows any country that has a bone to pick with the United States to attack us on our homeland, whether it's stealing information, actually stealing money, or preparing for a future war. So what do I mean by that? I believe that the only real threat to the United States right now, the only real realistic threat, is a large-scale cyber attack that denies us the critical infrastructure that makes our lives happy, healthy, and whole. And what we've seen in analysis of our systems, our SCADA, which are the networks that move everything from power to water to gas to all the things we need across the United States, and looking into critical infrastructure in itself, is that those big four countries, who are the broadest threat in terms of cyber threats to the United States, China, and then Russia, and then Iran and North Korea in that order, have been launching probe attacks and some successful cyber attacks in our critical infrastructure. And that critical infrastructure is our power grid, is our water, right? You want fresh water. And then people forget that a big part of critical infrastructure is the removal of wastewater. If you can't flush your toilet and some, or hit your drain on your sink, that can cause serious problems, especially in health. But also flow of gas and the things that we need. Telecom has been attacked. Finance sector has been attacked. And these attacks are using the best espionage tactics to infiltrate, to maintain persistence, which means they hang around as long as they can, and then see how deep they can get and how long they can persist unobserved. So perfect probe attacks, and these are occurring in greater frequency. It doesn't mean that tomorrow or next week there is going to be a large-scale attack. So don't run to your grocery store and hoard toilet paper. But it does mean that if current geopolitical issues continue in the pace that they're going, then the only way that these countries can hurt the United States is through a cyber attack. And we do need to be ready for it. And it's a drum I've been beating for some time, hoping that any
Eric,
administration takes it up.
Yeah, you're not the only one. My PhD dissertation was on this exact thing. The
Exactly.
convergence of OT and IT and the cybersecurity best practices between them. It's a disaster right now.
It is. And
it's
if you look
completely
at
wide open.
If you look at large infrastructure companies, and if you look at all the different pieces of the infrastructure, the only thing that's really saved us is, unlike a great example right now, is Ukraine. Russia in their war against Ukraine. And in my book, I spent a chapter on the email that launched a war, right? They started all of their kinetic. So now we have to talk about cyber attack versus kinetic attack in warfare.
Yeah.
You get two new terms, right? You have to talk about one or the other, because warfare is always part of both. But Russia, before even moving into Ukraine, launched a large-scale cyber attack that shut down the power in the power grids on the eastern Oblast, which are the easternmost regions that touch Russia. Then they moved in and cover of darkness, and they did this in the winter. They just attacked them again to shut off the power in Kyiv this winter, when things are freezing cold, to make people miserable. It is an incredible weapon. Now, the difference between Ukraine and the United States is Ukraine has one central power grid run by the Ukrainian government. Here in the U.S., our power grid is state-run, private and state partnerships, federal. It's this huge patchwork grid. But there have been analysis where, and it's been shown by the Department of Energy, if 9 separate subgrids in the United States, across the United States, are brought down at once, the entire grid collapses under its own weight. So we are vulnerable. It's just a lot harder for a threat actor to do what Russia did.
Because there's not one switch.
Because we're very decentralized. Yes.
Yeah,
you've got to get a lot of switches in a lot of places without being seen. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's a little harder, which is probably one of the reasons that it hasn't happened yet.
Well, and if we talk beyond power, if you talk water, I mean, how many different water districts? I live in California. Just in California alone, every county is its own water district, has its own pumps, its own treatment plants, has its own sewage, all that stuff. So that one is going to be really hard to attack. But we're seeing more and more of these attacks and probes, like you said, on critical infrastructure. What can we do as a nation then to shore this up? I mean, we have CISA, right, that is supposed to look at critical infrastructure and security. And frankly, it sounds like they're moving back in that direction. They kind of went sideways there for a little bit, but it seems like they're trying to buckle down a little better on our critical infrastructure. But it's like herding cats.
It's difficult. Well, there are a couple of problems. One, the federal response hasn't been great, and this isn't a partisan issue. It hasn't been great in any of the last administrations. I know that Trump did pour some money into a state-run endeavor where a bucket of money was going to be given to state CISOs, if they were able to show the investments they were going to make in critical infrastructure. I thought that was pretty important. The problem was that it was so hard to get the money. I was working with CISOs in different states to help them as a national security strategist and as an attorney to help them figure out how to get those buckets of money. And it's mind-boggling. And that's the problem with administrative oversight and some of the red tape that
Well,
happens.
and like you said, that's across different administration. That's just part
Across,
of
and across
big
different
government,
administrations,
right?
it's been a grab bag. You know, at the end of the day, we know exactly what has to happen. You shore up those defenses, you go out and you install better cybersecurity, particularly around this SCADA switching networks. You upgrade cybersecurity, you weaken a lot of the poor patching and failure to use two-factor authentication, all of the basics in cybersecurity, the cybersecurity 101, right? That are the
Yeah, it's not being
99%
done.
things that you should be doing, we are not doing across the board. So that has to happen. I mean, that's just step one. And step two is improving cybersecurity with better technology, using AI-based heuristics and analysis and looking for threats, especially threats that try to maintain persistence and onward. You know, part of the problem, and I actually state this in our book, I don't think a change in my book, I don't think a change is going to happen until there is a large-scale cyber attack.
Well, isn't that pretty typical though, Eric? I mean, look,
It is.
I mean, we can go all the way back to World War II, right? We weren't ready for World War II until Pearl Harbor.
Yes, that's right.
And then all of a sudden our manufacturing kicked in and everything kicked in. A lot of people are afraid to wake the dragon. I think that's what the Japanese Yamamoto said, right? I say, I'm afraid we woke the dragon. And they did, right? Once the U.S. pulls together and stops their infighting, no one in the world can stop, right? Once that happens.
That's 100% true. But I think there's a more nefarious thing that we're missing. We worry so much about nation state threat actors, and we should, especially in critical infrastructure, because look, if China ever decides we really want Taiwan, so we're taking it, the first thing they're going to do is launch a cyber attack here and then blame it on criminals. And one of the reasons that they're able to do that is today I'm more worried about cyber criminal attacks on critical infrastructure here in the US. If you just look at the last number of years, they have taken down cities, including Atlanta, Dallas, and others.
Just for ransomware, right?
For ransomware, right. And double extortion attacks, where they steal a lot of data on the population, medical records and financial records and social security numbers. And they tell the city, we're going to publish all this if you don't pay. Because they know that now everyone has good backups and they can restore, right? And they have resilience. Right. The biggest wake up, I think, for the United States was the attack on Colonial Pipeline out in your side of the woods in California. One of the biggest distributors of fuel from the West Coast to the East Coast. And when Colonial Pipeline was attacked, and you talk about OSINT versus, your operational controls versus your administrative controls. Colonial Pipeline was attacked just on the administrative side by a Russian cybercrime group.
Yeah.
But their protocol said that if we can't immediately determine where the attack came from and where it landed, we shut it all down because it could be a nation state attack. I think that was the right call. But the fact of the matter was, because they didn't have the context, the ability to say, okay, in our cybersecurity infrastructure, we know that the attacker is here in the administrative side of things. They're sitting in HR, they're sitting in the exec function. Let's shut down all the administrative, segment it from operational, and continue to pump gasoline. They didn't have the ability to do that. They do now. They didn't then.
Yeah, they do now, yeah.
And so they shut everything down. And the United States went into crisis. People forget this because it was during the pandemic, so we were already in crisis. But you couldn't get gasoline in a lot of places here in the East Coast. I tell a story about people getting in fistfights at one of my local gasoline stations here because they were lined up and the pumps were running out and people were getting upset. And my thought was like, why do you care? Nobody can drive anywhere anyway. We're all working from home. So it's stupid. But
well, yeah, could you imagine, Eric, if the pandemic wasn't going on, what mass chaos that would have caused?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that anything like this that is a chaotic event causes people to react in uncertain ways. So, it's not just your lights go out, your power go out. You can't get natural gas in your home to run your heater. When these things happen, people tend to freak out. And attackers know that that kind of panic puts a pressure situation. So the pressure situation for spies can be to cause chaos and disruption in the United States. They could do it around an election. They could do it around, all sorts of events, 4th of July, when people need their air conditionings. For cyber criminals, they know that it creates pressure, serious pressure, and that pressure can be pressure to pay, right? Because that's what they want. And so what I've been saying for some time is the only difference between a foreign intelligence service cyber attack and a cybercrime syndicate cyber attack is the outcome. They use the same tactics, they use the same protocols, the same tool bag. They carefully they use reconnaissance to learn everything about you. They find a person who will be their point of attack. That's the person with access to controls. They create a very sophisticated social engineering attack to fool that person into believing a lie. They steal that person's usernames, credentials, password, and their two-factor authentication. Then they get into your system. They maintain persistence as long as they can to corrupt as much as they can. And then here's the difference. The spies escape having stolen your information. They don't ever want you to know they're there. Or if it's critical infrastructure attack, they bring down everything they can and disappear. The criminals crash and burn and destroy everything on their way out and then tell you, you pay us and we'll give you your data back. We'll give you the keys to resurrect it. And we won't dump your information on the dark web for everyone to see.
Wow. So, all right. So now that we've scared everyone sufficiently, Eric, because but that's the reality of what's going on. What can we as an individual person or an organization, especially around critical infrastructure?
Yeah, well,
Right?
the steps are really the same. I came up with this methodology some time ago called PAID, because everybody can remember it, right? PAID. And
Yeah.
it's very simple. It stands for prepare, assess, investigate, and decide. So as an individual, you can do all of this. And as a CISO of a large enterprise, you can do the same thing. The only difference is scale, right? So let's think of a individual. We prepare ahead of the threat. We assess constantly because cybersecurity is not, or security itself is not set and forget. You've always got your radar up. When your assessment says you have a problem, you investigate. So you need the tools to investigate. You have to have the know-how and you have to have the ability to do it. And finally, you decide to act. One of the biggest problems in security and cybersecurity and all aspects of this is people don't act. They feel like I can't, or it won't happen to me, or they put their heads in the sand. So part of PAID which is a loop, is deciding to start the process. So start with prepare. Ahead of any attack, you have to prepare, which means that personally, you have to take a look at what you're doing. Are you going to sites where you're going to get into trouble? And we know what some of those are. Are you deploying two-factor authentication and not relying on a password? Are you reusing passwords everywhere? Are you being careful in what you do online? Most cyber attacks on an individual today are leveraging impersonation attacks and confidence schemes attacks. They are
Right.
fooling you by pretending they're someone you trust. So you have to use this be skeptical of everything, trust last approach to everything that comes to you on the internet. If it looks like your brother or sister, it might not be, or your best friend. Cyber criminals are using email as their, it's still the number one, but they know that we're getting more skeptical about email. So they're attacking us through social media, and they're attacking us through direct messages in social media and through text. So we have to be very careful about what we're seeing. And once you receive those texts or those emails or those social media DMs, you need to assess, that's part 2 of PAID,
Right.
and see if it's true. Don't immediately click on links or open attachments because you think it's from your bank, or you've just won the lottery, or you've got this great deal that you just saw through your social media app when you're scrolling. So always assess and put on your spy hunter hat. And when your assessment says, I think this might be a trick, this is where you have to investigate. Do some work. Find out if that person actually sent you the link. Go online and see if this is a legitimate company trying to send you this great deal, 50% off this new Valentine's Day gift, right? Make sure that that video you just watched from somebody is true or not a deep fake. And then finally, if your investigation says, I don't feel good about this, decide to act. Follow that cop instinct, that tickle in your stomach, and don't get fooled by the cyber attack.
I love you laid it out so simply, without specific tools there, which I love, because right, the tools used in a corporation are different than what I'm going to use
Yes.
at home, right? On especially on assess, they've got tons of tools for assessing, all that stuff. But the basic steps are the same throughout all these. So, what do I do when I do investigate and I do see something bad? Can I involve? Might decide to act? Is the right decision to call the FBI?
Well, that
Or they
also
just being
depends. For
integrated?
companies,
Yeah.
for companies who think it could be a nation state attack or a one of the high-end cybercrime syndicates who tend to come from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, then yes, reaching out to the FBI's IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, is one important because they are
Not the
the
only.
best map of statistics for these attacks. We want to continue to show how many are happening, and two, they can provide some help. If they think it's a nation state, then they will come in and help. If they think it's espionage, they will come in and help. But even if they don't, it is a good resource and it's important to report it. On the other hand, as a consumer, you can go to different local and state police agencies who will have some have cybercrime divisions. Like, for example, I had a client in New York, in Queens actually, who was the victim of what we call a pig butchering attack. It was a romance fraud where he thought that he had a romantic relationship with a woman that he met online, and that they went to text. And it was actually she. We found her and ended up being a cyber criminal who then, with a gang of criminals, defrauded him by getting him to invest in a fake investment scheme where he put a ton of his money. The nice thing about where he was is they had a good cybercrime division who was able to quickly track the cryptocurrency investment he was making and freeze the wallet and repatriate a bunch of his money before it disappeared into the cyber criminals.
So our local
offline
authorities.
wallets.
So our local authorities should be probably our primary, our first place
Local
to
for
go.
cybercrime,
Got it.
and then for foreign intelligence, then yes, definitely the FBI. Local can be a grab bag. New York, big state, a lot of cybercrime, and they know what they're doing. If you're in a small jurisdiction somewhere, a municipality, your local police probably are just going to take the police report that helps you with insurance. So at the end of the day, what I say is we are responsible for protecting ourselves. The number one thing that we as individuals have to do is learn about it, is understand the different ways that we're being attacked. If you can see the attack coming, then you can defend against it.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is counterintelligence. You have to be a spy hunter. You have to understand the different ways that they attack. And there are 6 different ways they attack. They use deception, they use infiltration, impersonation, confidence schemes, exploitation, and destruction. That acronym, by the way, comes out to DICE. It's another cool one. So you have the counterintelligence is DICE, and the cyber spy hunting is paid. And between the two of those, you are a fully functional spy hunter who can see the attack coming and defend against it.
Everyone that listens to this episode, you're now a spy hunter. You've been trained
There you go.
by a real spy. This has been really great, Eric. If people if they want to learn more, they go out and buy your book. Is that probably the easiest way to go, right?
Certainly, a couple things. My book is available wherever books are sold, and if you kind of like my voice, you can listen to my audiobook. I read the book myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because a lot of it is in the first person. There's a follow-through story about a cyber attack against a big company I was working with. You're in the middle of a ransomware case and how we solved the case. And then I use a lot of storytelling for each of those different ways that cyber criminals attack, and then for paid, how you could protect against it. So I use the ways that they've attacked in the beginning of the book to say, like, if you used paid, here how you could have solved this problem.
You could
So
have
it's all
solved that. I love
storytelling.
that.
But you can also reach out to me directly on my website, ericoneill.net. And every week on Tuesday morning, I publish a newsletter that keeps the book alive. So it keeps updating the book, every week
That's a lot
because
of
cyber
work, Eric.
attacks, they never stop.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
And you can join that at ericoneill.net/newsletter and join the community of many thousands of people who we collaborate and our goal is to make the world safe from cyber attacks.
That is awesome, Eric. You're doing a great job out there, and I love what you brought, very practical things that my audience can use today. So thanks for coming on the show.
Darren, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure, and stay safe out there.
Thanks for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation. If you enjoyed today's conversation, give us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. It really helps others discover the show. If you want to go deeper, join our exclusive community at patreon.com/embracingdigital, where we share bonus content and you can always connect with other change makers like yourself. You can always find more resources at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, keep embracing the digital transformation.